podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Burek, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Factory of the Future. This is Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz. Today, we are going to be talking about a workforce crisis. So, in today's episode, you can expect to understand a huge gap that we are facing and a big challenge ahead of us in the manufacturing space with regards to the workforce. We're going to talk today about what we can do to solve this immediately, how we see technology playing a role in solving this on the long term, and also some paths forward in terms of what we can do to completely solve this problem in its whole. In its entirety. AW is actually doing a lot of research on this topic, so I'm going to turn it over to him to introduce some key statistics and get the conversation started. So AW, thanks for bringing this topic to the table today.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Alexandra. So what we're talking about today is labor shortages, particularly in the U.S. And a lot of my research is on what we're seeing for the future, and particularly what this whole podcast is about is Factory of the Future. So this study was developed by Deloitte, the consulting company, and I thought they did a really good job on the article and what they brought to the table. The article is titled, "The Manufacturing Workforce Crisis: Pathway to Tomorrow's Talent," and in the article, what it talks about is a labor shortage that we're seeing that it's starting to take place. Around 2.1 million manufacturing jobs are become unfulfilled. And if you start to look at this from a perspective, now we had the pandemic, and as everyone knows, we saw that big drop in everything. The talks about the great resignations of people not wanting to go back to work, and especially. I'm passionate about this because I think about the manufacturing community, because in manufacturing, it's you don't ask your child growing up, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And like, well, I want to work on the assembly line. And while a lot of those jobs are being automated, there's still a great need for having talent and skilled and unskilled laborers in the manufacturing communities. Since the pandemic, there is still over 578,000 jobs that are becoming unfulfilled within the industries, and that's just in the U.S.
Yeah. So, like, how do we, like, what are companies doing today? Like, what are you seeing with your clients that you work with, and what do you know from your experience working in the manufacturing space? What are people doing and businesses doing to solve this problem?
The easiest thing to do, there's three things. One is you start running with overtime. So you're having the employees work longer hours, which comes at an expense. Mm-hmm. The second thing is you bring in temporary labor, and again, there's more of expense to it.
Right.
The third is you're not fulfilling your orders. You know what? There's actually four, and the fourth is you look for co-packers or other means to it, which can be overseas, and taking those jobs actually full time away.
Mm. So that makes me think though, like, if people are in temporary employment, does that count as unemployed? Or does that count as gaps for the, like, even though, so technically the position's filled, but it doesn't count as being filled because it's by temp labor, or what?
The position's still not filled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, and then I guess from like, obviously it's January, we're looking forward to kind of a change in presidency. My question would be, I would say if I were in a manufacturing, like, hourly wage employee's shoes. And maybe I did that, and then I went and did some gig work because I wasn't really in the mood for the factory stuff. But then now with President Trump stepping into office and this commitment or plan to eliminate tax on overtime, do you think that that could play in a role in solving or closing this gap a bit? Because I also know that part of his agenda is to increase manufacturing and production in the U.S. So if we're doing that, it would only be hopeful that we would also see these employees or people return to the manufacturing space, hopefully as a result of the reduced tax or elimination of tax on overtime. What do you think about that?
Well, I can only give you like my novice answer is that I don't think it's going to change it.
Really?
I believe that it's a trending thing. I don't think that just reducing one thing is going to, fulfill 2.1 million jobs by 2030. And it's because we've probably seen this before, is that a lot of times sometimes it's not the wage, it's the conditions that you're exposed to. And people want to feel that they're valued. People want to feel that they're making a difference, and they like to get up and want to go to their work in the mornings. And if you don't have those things, reducing taxes on overtime, I don't think it's going to have a major impact on it. So it comes down to a people thing, not a government thing.
Okay. Well, I mean, I love to hear more about what you think there. Maybe we could talk a little bit about what you're thinking in terms of this human machine environment, since that sounds to be kind of where you were going with this, and how we can make the manufacturing job not only financially interesting or maybe more sexy, but also in terms of, like you said, some of the maybe less black and white areas like this, the feeling that you get at your work and some of these other things. Because I do know our business, our company faced some challenges when, it was faced with, we were up against Amazon and Target warehousing versus a industrial packaging manufacturing plant. And that was a pretty hard hit to us. And what you said is true. It's not just about kind of the wage at that point. People are really considering some of these other things, like what they're exposed to and how they feel. So what do you have to say about kind of what do you see in terms of technology and people and how we can close the gap with that lens and perspective in mind?
Actually, before I answer that question, can you elaborate more on how you were competing with Amazon? I mean, because let me give my premises. Like, so here's Amazon's a great point. Amazon pays more than competitive jobs, and they've got benefits onto it. I've never worked at Amazon, but I know from hearing it is that they work a lot of hours. They've got a lot of expectations, and in a lot of cases, I'm not going to say that the executives don't, but a lot of their hiring managers don't show a lot of respect for the players, for their employees.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear from the people that I've heard that work at Amazon or have worked at Amazon. I've talked to two people, definitely different roles. One was clearly a white collar, mid-senior level executive, and the other was a blue collar, like warehouse worker. Seems to me like the jobs, or keeping those jobs, are not sustainable just from a overall well-being standpoint, is what I gathered in the conversations I had with those two individuals. We are competing from a proximity standpoint. So where where one of our plants is located, there was some shifting going on in that area, and essentially an Amazon and a Target warehouse were placed within a 2 to 5 block radius. Most of our employees are walk/drive to work, but drive from a 5 mile to 10 mile radius. So naturally now these new job opportunities came up. I think from a pay standpoint, we remained competitive, but when you're faced with choosing working on an assembly line and working with metal industrial containers and kind of recycling them and taking them from a dirty container to a clean container. You're exposed to a myriad of things. Obviously, our company does absolute best practices in terms of making sure that safety, we had our best safety year yet, I believe, in the last year across the company. Never had a better safety year in history. At the same token, when you're moving boxes around and everything is palletized and forklifted, and I'm sure it's bright and light because also these warehouses were brand new in the last 2 years built, not existing for the last 30 years, all these things. You could say that's where we may have been just, I guess competing is in the environment, the exposure, and we're still doing great. We actually as a business have cut on overtime lately, which I think is an interesting move. I know that a lot of people are really optimistic about the industrial manufacturing space. We supply a lot of oil, a lot of food, a lot of pharmaceutical companies. And I mean, it seems like everybody is feeling pretty optimistic about 2025. So let's hope that they're correct in that. But yeah, that was a little rant about that.
Well, sorry, but this is a perfect example of what Industrial 5.0 and where it's leading into. And it's that human-centric approach of having, you don't have to pay the most, but you have to take care of your employees. Yeah. And a lot of times it's not the pay, but it's the environment.
Yeah.
And I've met several people that worked for Amazon, and they've gone other places, just like they're burnt out. The regulations they have to do, or not regulations, but the quotas they have to meet. Yeah. And just being treated like a human is an important part of it. And it leads into like, what are these 2.1 million jobs going to come from? You have to take care of your employees. And by the way, it's not pay. It's just, I write about this in the idea of the self-determination theory. And it's about creating autonomy, relatedness, and people having competencies in their job.
Yeah.
And one of the things you can say that those are easy, but there's also the idea of skilling people up and investing into them. And you look back on this, my picture in the back is from Henry Ford. And the idea is, you can not train them and they stay, and you can train them and they leave, but either way, you're in jeopardy if you just don't do nothing, because what's the point of having an untrained employee that's working in your area? Because safety is important, quality is important, output's important.
Yeah. I mean, I look back on my own personal experience and personal journey in the last couple of years. So right now I'm currently pursuing a new role at the organization I work for. And the last few years, I've personally gone through quite a lot, emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever. And one of the things that I want to highlight as I talk to them about the pursuit of this new role is how basically 2 years ago, my life crumbled. Literally everything just fell apart. My relationship with my boyfriend, who I thought was going to be my husband, father of my children, he left. Multiple family members died suddenly and just due to disease. My job was in turmoil. I changed my role changed 3 different times across 3 different segments of our business in that year. Some of them I was in favor of, some of them I was not. But either way, it was very hard to get a footing based on just those changes in the job. Financially, things got out of hand for me. So all these things happen. And I had a choice of choosing between, like, let this kill me, basically, or rebuild every fiber of my being. And I'm glad I chose the latter. But in rebuilding kind of every fiber of my being intentionally, I've just given so much more to my job than I was ever able to give before, right? So if more companies, I think if there's a business leader out there who has somebody, even just one person on your team that you can pour into, pour into them. If you, like we talked about before, if you notice that somebody is like a little off kilter, say something to them privately, respectfully, and wholeheartedly, genuinely from a good place, you know? But I truly believe that all these things that I'm doing outside of work directly tie back to an incredibly better performance at work. You know, like my pursuits with this podcast and other things have just carried their way in throughout my entire work day to be a better contributor to my team and to my company ultimately.
What was the turning point on that?
I was pretty much just suicidal, and I was like, okay, well, I hate my life. I hate the way my future looks. I'm not in it, or I have to change everything. And I changed everything. Yeah.
I don't know if we talked about this on the air, but that I told you I was with one company where at the start of the meeting they had to give a ranking for how their day is going. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I do remember that. Yeah.
And I initially hated it.
Yeah.
Because if you weren't a 10, it's like, why aren't you a 10?
Yeah.
But what it does is it creates a relatedness with others. So I'm somewhat of an introverted person, but if I'm not a 10, why aren't you a 10? And then you don't share all your baggage, but you open up some breadcrumbs, and it leads to conversations, and it leads to what I believe is relatedness. So it's part of that self-determination theory of people having a collaboration between each other. And I think that's an early, easy thing managers can do.
Yeah. And that's what gets business done. I talk about that. Like we've talked about, just like your ranking system is the same conversation we were having, was how I forced my team to start with a personal and a professional win, and how that not only just brings a human aspect to the business, it brings positivity to, everyone is always wants to talk about in meetings where we're falling short, where we need to improve, what we're not doing. But sometimes it's really important to bring with us all the progress that we've made, and, what good is happening on a day-to-day basis, and how we can share that with our team. Right. So I think we got a little off track, but that's okay. Things happen. Life happens, right? This is what it's all about. This is the human-centric approach. So we live by it. We breathe it. We are the human-centric approach. But AW, just getting a little bit back on track and talking about this workforce gap, what do you see as kind of a path for the future? Like, we're talking a little bit about kind of how we bring these things to our meetings, how we can foster a sense of family and oneness, I guess, within our teams. But what do you see, I guess, in the future, and what do you think manufacturing leaders can do to attract and be the company that doesn't have the workforce problem, I guess?
Yeah. So let's look at it a couple ways. You've got your manufacturing leaders, you've got your HRs, and those that are just listening in manufacturing.
Right.
If you're a manufacturing leader, start thinking about workforce management. Move away from the rigid job descriptions to more flexible.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of research on adaptive work management, which is essentially just let's do it. Let's incorporate people, being listening, creating autonomy.
Yeah.
Continue to evaluate your talent process and look about those potential biases or barriers that exist. I'm working on a new theory now. It's called Sheen's model of organizational culture, which deals a lot with biases, and we'll probably talk about that in later episodes because I'm really kind of honing in on that for some of my research. HR, think about the high school outreach programs that can exist. Yeah. Not everyone can go to college, but
not everyone should go to college.
Right. But there's great careers that can exist, and grasping on some of that talent early on. The military veterans that are coming back, implement mentorship and sponsorship programs that within groups or communities. But also think about visit, there's many Manufacturing Institute websites. I've got one myself. If you go to learnmar.com, which is maintenance and reliability, I'm working on building up that community that has access to both our podcast, but also blogs and also resources on understanding, where you can do to developing a manufacturing career. And connecting with local community colleges are definitely on that. But this was an article. I really like it. It's from Deloitte. I subscribe to their newsletter now, and I realized that they put out a lot of great content. And if you're interested in learning more about just what's going on in the manufacturing communities and the talent pools, they do have some great articles that are well put together. Great surveys, and I think in the future we'll probably have a couple more topics that we're going to bring forward on that.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that I'm seeing on the notes that you shared for today's episode is some things to do, well, at least from my perspective, with maybe ways that women can help other women in manufacturing, right? So we kind of talked about potentially doing an episode, maybe the next episode, on kind of how women fit into the manufacturing puzzle and what we see in terms of the trends for the future. So as I'm thinking about as that relates to this current episode, this note that you have about mentorship and sponsoring programs, especially for underrepresented groups, like I think one real hold that, manufacturing businesses, large and small, can put into place. And one thing I might bring actually forward to my group in my company is a women's mentorship program for the company, right? If like, for example, our company is like something like 11,000 employees. And in the last major report they put out, like 2,000 of them were women. And the first executive vice president was just put in place, I think, in the last 2 to 3 years for us. Other than that, women had not made it, as far as I was seeing, past director level. So I think if we could start taking a women's mentorship program and bringing that into the manufacturing space, it might not only be a place to kind of, again, create that sense of community camaraderie, but also keep women in manufacturing, which you mentioned is potentially a risk and a concern that we might talk about next episode. And then just looking forward to kind of leveraging these different viewpoints and perspectives and making, I guess, manufacturing businesses better with that in mind.
Yeah, and these are the things you do that can bridge that gap that we're seeing.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I thought today was a great episode. Thank you so much for bringing this topic to light. For those of you listeners out there, feel free to leave a comment, maybe a rating about the show. If you have an idea about how we could solve this problem or a topic you'd like to hear, we'd love to hear from you. But with that, I think we're clocking out of here.
We are clocking out of here like finished goods. Awesome.
Have a great day, everyone.
This is Factory of the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and help others discover the cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.